Hey, it's Soul with another video, and today I'm going to be doing yet another coverage video of the latest Q&A with Ian Hazzikostas and his best old buddy old pal, Josh Allen aka Lore. As usual, I'm going to be doing this in a podcasty format. Don't worry too much about looking for game footage or other cool visuals other than my beautiful face and however many gray hairs that I have. So if you feel like counting, feel free. But otherwise, let's just get right to the questions. Question 1. You promised us better communication. Why were so many changes undocumented in 8.1, as in professional requirements on crafted gear, the multitude of Mythic Plus mob changes, and so on? This is something that I have kind of a pet peeve over too. There were a bit too many things that just weren't mentioned in these patch notes. There was a very inadequate survival guide that listed like a number of the bigger changes and features that are coming, but none of the like quality life fixes. And there are posts all over the internet that are describing all of these otherwise undocumented changes. Ian described three sorts of screw-ups, I guess I should say. One kind of screw-up was just they screwed up. They didn't put it in. They should have thought about it and put it in, and they did not. The second comes from bug fixes, and the example that Ian used had to do with the profession requirements on crafted gear. Apparently that was just a bug fix that was put in. One of the developers, programmers, engineer people, they looked at it and they said, oh, well, this was supposed to have professional requirements. Let's put them in. Bloop. And thought that that was it. And that's something that didn't necessarily need to be communicated to the rest of the team. Unfortunately, that was a mistake, and it resulted in the weirdness of people logging in and they suddenly weren't able to use some of their crafted gear because they didn't happen to have the profession that was aligned to it anymore. That was since fixed, and now it's being communicated to us players that's going forward. Any gear that is made during this season 2 of Battle for Azeroth, they are going to have profession level requirements attached to them, so we should expect to see those on tooltips, or they at least told us now. The third kind of error was they forgot. They do, admittedly, as someone who is at least knowledgeable of QA systems and the kinds of reporting that you typically see in games, there are a lot of like items that are involved with the developing of a game or the patching of a game. There is a likelihood, even though that likelihood should be 0, that things are done early on, and the example that Ian used had something to do with Mythic Plus changes and certain mobs' behavior or something like that. They did this change like months ago, so that kind of tells you just how soon they start working on future patch content. However, because it was that long ago, something got missed. It wasn't brought down the pipe of communication, and while the implementation went through, the notes about it did not. Ian went on to say that their goal is to make sure that the list of undocumented changes is a list of minor stuff. Things that it's like, okay, it's not that big of a deal anyway. Not the kind of game-changing things that we're seeing in this patch. With that said, it's nice to know their goals, whoop-de-doo, but I would be more satisfied with hearing from them just what are the plans for their internal communication process. It's not something that everyone is interested in. They're just interested in the game not being, the patches not being screw-ups when they're first deployed and having to wait for a bunch of hotfixes to make the game feel playable for them. I know I've said this time and time again, but I would love to see a more inside look into the company and to the process, and just kind of get more into the heads of the developers, programmers, engineer that help put this game together. That kind of took a while, so I'll try to go faster. Next question. Could you possibly add rationale for changes to patch notes and or hotfixes? This would be a huge step in communication and would help the community see things through your eyes. So the question that's being asked is, can you put like developer notes in more things than what's being seen now? Ian did acknowledge that they do this, haha, with regards to class changes, so that way they can help the individual classes and specs, or the players who represent them, understand what's the mindset as to what they're trying to go for. Because class changes, they're a bit more nuanced than the other example that Lore used was, well, obviously, if we are reducing enemy HP by a certain amount, it's because we felt like reducing their enemy HP by a certain amount. Other things, such as class changes, they do warrant a bit more explanation. Other things still, such as the not being able to delete your Mythic Keystone anymore, that's something that probably also should have been communicated as well. As for Ian's direct answer, yes, he would like to do more developer talk about certain things that are coming down the pipe. The recent patch 8.1 broke the popular add-on Cross RP, which gave players an opt-in means to communicate in-game across faction barriers. Was this intentional, and if not, can it please be fixed? This was not intentional, in fact. Ian explained in not so complicated but in vague terms that they basically broke the system that allowed that add-on to work. It's not something that they can revert because this was more of a security fix than something that was just designed to annoy people, but they do have something in place that, at least as of this recording, seems to be in-game now. The Elixir of Tongues is a thing that you can buy. It lasts for an hour and it costs a little under 8 gold. This will allow you to listen to whatever the other faction is saying. However, if you type, it's going to still come out as gibberish to the other person unless they too are using the Elixir of Tongues. This is Blizzard's way of allowing players to opt in to intercommunication between players. One of the reasons they explain why they don't allow intercommunication between the factions for so long now is mostly because of toxicity and PvP realms and that sort of thing. I, for one, think that this is a great change because it is opt-in. By default, it's not going to work. So if someone's trying to talk trash at you, if you don't have that debuff, if you don't have the Elixir of Tongues used, then it's just going to come out as gibberish, not a big deal. On the other hand, this gives kind of a test for the player base at large to see whether or not we can handle talking to each other with some maturity. And when I'm talking maturity, I'm not just talking about not trash talking to each other, but when it comes to the inevitability of people trash talking to each other, that people will be responsible and will report and do that sort of thing. From the sounds of it, if this hotfix seems successful, this might be something that can become permanently built into the game, with a patch or whatnot. It's something that they'll be able to make just an attribute of RP realms or the game as a whole with like a toggle. Wondering why the change to deleting Mythic Plus keys seemed like a great quality of life change made in BFA, only to be removed quickly after implementation. What was the reason behind the change? According to Ian, the reasoning behind this has kind of two parts. One is to prevent the funneling of players into certain dungeons, because with choice comes the ability to choose the path of least resistance, something that came from Greg Street, aka Ghostcrawler, from way back in the day. And it's not something that's easy to disagree with. It is, in fact, a common practice to see the hard thing and be like, well, if I can do this easier, you know what, maybe I think I will. We've seen it in the Mechanar, although personally, back in BC days, I did slave pens a lot. I don't know why. More recently, we've seen it with Mob Souls, and currently, well, I don't do enough Mythic Plus to really have an answer to that, but people are just choosing the easiest dungeon to do, depending on what the affixes are. So that primarily is the reason why they don't allow the deletion of keys. The other side of this answer, though, is addressing what the actual problem is with players wanting to delete keys, is that some of the dungeons are too hard, or that they're imbalanced depending on the affix, or that they're just not fun dungeons, maybe. So that's the other side of things that Blizzard will be trying to address. And they talked about something very interesting when it comes to their data gathering and analytics. It's good feedback to hear directly from players just what their experiences are in their dungeons. It's another thing to see data as to finding out, which one of these trash packs happens to kill the most players? Which of the bosses happens to do the most damage? Which of this and that? Basically, there's a lot more analytics that Blizzard now has access to that, for whatever reason, they didn't have before. Actually, I take that back. They did talk about the reason. It's because they focused more on the killing of bosses in Mythic Plus as opposed to the progression through trash through dungeons, which obviously is a very important thing. So from the looks of it, we're not going to see that level of choice become available again. On the flip side, it would be great to see the dungeons have a better parity for, in terms of difficulty, depending on the affix. If this was a perfect world and all the dungeons were objectively fun, then something like wanting to delete keys, that would be a considerably smaller thought in people's heads. At least that's how I would imagine it. Why were dungeon changes not in patch notes, and why were ones made to increase challenge and change strategy without addressing pain points of other dungeons? This one I think I addressed a lot in the previous question, talking about the analytics and whatnot, but this identifies Blizzard's weakness before, where they just weren't getting the best data, and the kinds of updates that they were doing, they were done a bit too far in advance. So we're just kind of seeing the pain points of, hey, this is where we kind of screwed up, and now they're going to continue to make adjustments. Again, in the future, the idea here is to make the dungeons a little bit more even in difficulty and fun, so that way these kinds of issues come up less. Are there any steps being taken to improve the Mythic Plus pug experience? Currently, dungeons are extremely grueling and punishing for the casual player. It feels like without voice chat and coordination, groups just fall apart. This is one of those questions where I look at Ian's face and I think to myself, okay, I wonder if he's irritated by this kind of question, because the answer was right in front of this person's face. Going back to the question, he says, it feels like without voice chat and coordination, groups just fall apart. So the response to that, my response to that at least, would be, well, why don't you use voice chat? And so that way you can better improve the coordination, so that you don't fall apart. I know that's a bit facetious, but that's why I'm not a developer. But that's why Ian and Lore invited people to come in and give input about voice chat. I think that that's a very important thing when it comes to the coordination of any higher level content. There comes a point where people need to be more than just the faceless pugs, as I like to joke. That you need to actually talk with these people and interact with them, and not simply go in with expectations because, oh, this person happens to have a good Raider IO score, or this person happens to have a good item level, so there's no need to worry about anything. I'm just going to presume that they know what they're talking about, or they know what they're doing. And that might not be the case 100% of the time, is it? It's kind of a tough loop to handle, and speaking very personally, I have a lot of trouble trying to do Mythic Plus with pugs, because I don't like dealing with strangers. I'd rather just deal with my guildmates and people that I know. In case of things going wrong, I don't want to get yelled at by some rando person for whatever reason. So solving this, in my opinion, is a very multifaceted thing. It's tough because Ian also talked about communities and how that can be a thing, and you guys know how I feel about communities. I feel like that Blizzard just hasn't thrown a lot of support to those at all, and I think that they could. It would do everyone a really big favor. But voice chat is a good start. It would do well for Blizzard to try and promote that a little bit more. They did say that they don't want to try to shove it in people's faces in the UI, and I think that's a good thing. It's a very non-intrusive thing. But I think it's also a good idea to remind folks, hey, you know what? Using voice chats, it's gonna help. Next question. Why do we have to wait until the opening of the Battle of Dazara lore for the new Mythic Plus season to open? And in the same boat, why do we have to wait an extra month for the new Azerite traits to be available? Ian's answer pretty much mirrors mine. It's all about parity and making sure that everything is going parallel. Otherwise, if you have anything start early, all of a sudden that thing that starts early becomes the dominant thing to do, and it risks compromising everything else. In Ian's example, if Mythic Plus were to open early, then it would be very easy for people to just gear the hell up through Mythic Plus, have a whole bunch of item level, and be able to just dominate the raids, and it wouldn't feel challenging or fun. Same thing would go for PvP. So the Mythic Plus people, well, they're going to have a great time. Meanwhile, everyone else who doesn't bother with Mythic Plus, they're going to find themselves wanting. As for waiting an extra month for the Azerite traits to be available, it does make sense to me when Ian explained that that Blizzard doesn't want people to suddenly jump into 8.1, see the opportunity to get this new gear, and then feel forced to be like, oh great, well I guess I gotta farm for all this gear and replace everything within the next month and some change, so that way I feel viable when the raid comes out. That's not the kind of behavior that they want players to have. Next question. It'd be nice to have a source of Titan residuum that isn't finite. I know that you don't want us farming it, but can't you make the dungeons, or at least the end of dungeons, have at least a chance to drop some, or shards of it? It'd be nice on the 0 Azerite drop raid weeks. In my opinion, Titan residuum is one of those currencies, or one of these situations where, how should I say this? So Titan residuum has a core audience, the target audience I should say, And that is with Mythic Plus people. The people who run Mythic Plus, they're going to find the biggest source of Titan Residuum in their Mythic Plus cache. There is no faster way to get Titan Residuum than to do a certain level of a Mythic Plus dungeon. The few other sources that are available are a far, far cry from just doing Mythic Plus and getting a chest there, because again, Titan Residuum is for those kinds of players. I've been observing that some players are making it a problem for themselves by taking this Titan Residuum and applying that not as a Mythic Plus kind of currency, but just a catch-all currency for the sake of their progression, whatever that is. And I don't think that's a very healthy thing. I'm not going to stop you from thinking that way, but unfortunately, Titan Residuum is just not for every kind of player. It's for a very specific kind of player. One more thing that Ian added to this was that if there was some sort of way to just endlessly farm for Residuum, then people would do it, because that would be the only way to continually farm for Residuum. And I believe the quote was, he doesn't want people to be using that route of getting this currency and just grinding their faces off. How do you plan on handling the transition from Season 1 to Season 2 regarding Titan Residuum? It hasn't been officially communicated yet, except for here during the Q&A, but basically what's going to happen is that for the values that you're receiving, or for the amount of Titan Residuum that you're receiving now, consider that part of this particular season. It's just a much smaller amount. When the season begins, you're going to be able to get a much higher amount of Residuum, but at the same time, purchasing the higher level rewards is going to be that much more expensive. Paraphrasing from Ian, this is Blizzard's way of avoiding caps, or avoiding the ability or the pressure for players to get, 2,000 or 3,000 Titan Residuum before the season starts, so that way they can start blowing it on stuff. They'd rather give the opportunity for players to start messing around with the currency now. Maybe you can spend a little of it now, so that way you can get some of your gear caught up, because when the season starts, when you open up your first Mythic Plus chest, you're probably going to get a crap ton more than you normally would the week before. So my advice for people is, if you want to save it, cool, go ahead and save it. It's going to give you like a little bit of a boost. If you want to start spending it now so you can get some of your gear caught up, so that way you can be a little bit ahead of the game when the season starts, and you just want to get your item level caught up, that's cool too. Next, the purpose of artifact knowledge is to reduce the gap between players who play a lot and those who do not. With artifact knowledge on hold for 6 weeks, there will be a massive gap going into next tier that won't easily close for several weeks. What are your plans to prevent this in lieu of artifact knowledge? So this is one of Blizzard's screw-ups with communication, where in this case, they didn't say anything to us. But what is going to happen, now that we know, is that knowledge levels are going to go up week after week, but they have a cap. It just happened to be a coincidence that by the time artifact knowledge capped, that's when the patch came out. So, going forward, let's pretend that in 20 weeks or so, the next raid is going to start. But before that, when we get to like week 15 or so, we're probably going to find our artifact knowledge to cap at like 30 or whatever that is. Ian went on to explain what, in my opinion, was a bit of a convoluted answer. If artifact knowledge still was in fact a thing, then the player who kept playing, then they would be that much farther ahead than the person who, well, is not playing. The numbers will eventually work out, but in the meantime, that person who's that far ahead, not only are they far ahead, but they've unlocked pretty much all the Azerite traits and everything that they need, while the other person has not, and that really sucks. Although it's not going to suck for much longer, which I'm going to get to in a little bit. And here's why. Any plans making the Heart of Azeroth more relevant or engaging? During Legion, we had weapons to look at and actually use, be it just for a new attack. Many players didn't hide the artifact skins via transmog, they liked them. Why must the Heart of Azeroth feel so bland? So here's the answer that has me, at least, really excited. Ian did acknowledge that it does feel good to unlock new things, but at the same time, because you're also obtaining new pieces of armor, that whole sequence of getting new things just starts feeling like weird, if not crappy, because the whole argument of, hey, I got this new gear, but now it's a downgrade, or I got this new gear and now I need to power it up again, that sort of thing. From the sound of it and what Ian is saying about the future design of 8.2 and Azerite gear, Future Azerite gear in 8.2 is just going to have all the powers unlocked, and there's going to be a kind of new progression that involves the neck, the heart of Azeroth itself. So it's going to turn the Azerite system into purely a meta, just trying to hunt for like the best gear that you can get with the coolest powers that you can get yourself a hold of. The effective grind for artifact power instead is going to be stuck on a static thing, and like I said, it's going to be your Heart of Azeroth, which again, presumably this is all speculative and all of this is subject to change, but we can at least expect some sort of static kind of power or tree structure or something that will let our characters feel even cooler than it was before without having to deal with the mishmash of having to swap out gear. That's going to be its own separate thing. So that's got me super excited. It pretty much negates a lot of the arguments that are going against Azerite armor as it is currently. It does kind of make me feel a little weird that they're announcing this what is basically like 6, maybe 7 months in advance, because they did talk about this in 8.2, and this definitely does sound like not a 0.5 kind of change, but a 0.2 or whatever kind of change instead. This is a big deal. Overall, though, I'm still pretty darn happy that this overall change is going to happen anyway. Having to talk about and discuss this kind of system, it has been pretty exhausting, I have to admit, with trying to help players understand some of the ease of burden that they don't really have to feel with this system, but it can't help it anyway. But it's so early, all we have to analyze right now is Ian's words. So we're just gonna have to wait and see for a good couple months until we see the beginnings of the system and what it has to, what we have to look forward to. Next, do you plan on increasing gear reward item levels for Warfronts and World Quest as time goes on? A little disappointed that the new Warfront still rewards 340 with the new raid coming out. Decreases incentive to do them. Shouldn't the gear scale up with new content? Basically, no. With regards to Arathi, they don't plan on increasing the item level rewards. That's still going to be 340. The item level of gear from the Darkshore Warfront, it is what it is right now, but when the season starts, that item level is going to go up. So it's going to be a little bit weird. Each of the factions are going to be able to do the Warfront just at least once, presumably. I mean, there might be a chance that the Alliance does it again before the new season starts, which would be kind of due because they'll still be getting like the lower item level gear. But I haven't really done the math in my head. I can't say for sure. The idea, though, is that they're making Warfronts a piece of content that you can, in fact, graduate from. It's not going to be something that you'll feel that you have to continually farm each and every Warfront forever for the sake of keeping your gear relevant. Of course, if you want to do it for like cosmetics and transmog, yeah, then definitely go ahead and do it. But in Ian's example, just like with raids, there comes a point where you don't need to farm the raid anymore. It's not a big deal. You don't have to go back and get that sort of gear unless it's like Titanfall. Well, that's a different conversation anyway. The point is, you're going to be moving on from one Warfront to the next as soon as you feel satisfied. Next question. Can we get Warfront rotations to speed up a bit? Once a month to participate in a particular Warfront is kind of lame. Nope. There's no plans to make this rotation any faster. After all, Warfronts are not just Warfronts. There's the Warfront itself. There's the patrol phase when you have the zone control and you're able to farm for the rares and take care of the world boss. Then there's the gathering phase where you can turn in those different kinds of daily-ish quests so you can get the extra rep and resources and whatnot. Making it any faster disrupts the flow, or otherwise risks compromising the reward structure to the point where Blizzard would have to balance it out by decreasing the rewards that you get from Warfronts, or limiting the number of times that you can run it, or something like that. As a Horde player on a Horde dominant server, I will never see the 30% war mode bonus. This is a problem. Ian corrected the OP here, saying that being on a Horde dominant server has nothing to do with war mode itself, given that war mode is more like a shard than an actual realm. Personally, I'm still not fond of having a bonus at all. I'd say just take the bonuses out and then see what happens. That said, there has been a fairly positive reception, at least with Warfront participation, at the moment with the patch having just come out. But of course, the patch just came out. We can expect a reasonable participation rate of all different and new content, but eventually that's going to drop off. And from there, we're going to have to look at the levels and see how players are responding to that, and then Blizzard will have to respond to that response. Haha. In 8.1, we will be able to acquire some rewards from island expeditions with currency, but this doesn't include the items that were available before 8.1. Will the previous items be added to the vendor at some point? Ian explained that there might be some way to target certain items towards the end of the expansion, as if there was like, I don't know, like kind of like how Legendaries work maybe. He didn't really get into this at all, but he tried to at least address the issue of a player that is farming through expeditions normally. They have almost all the items, all the unique items that they want to get, but they're missing a couple. They want to try to address that kind of issue, but that kind of issue isn't going to come until the end of the expansion. Next question. It was previously mentioned by Yithasins back in September that new ways to obtain vicious saddles were being worked on for 8.1. What are they? For those of you, and me because I didn't know what a vicious saddle even was, I'm a noob, those are tokens that you can trade for additional PvP mounts. So the way that this is going to work in 8.1 is that once you fill up that bar that first time and you get your cool new PvP mount thing, you can fill it up again and you will get a vicious saddle. So just keep doing that until the end of the season. Then the new mount is going to come out and you can repeat that cycle until you get enough vicious saddles, and that's it. That's the end. So that's pretty cool. And now I know. Haha. G.I. Joe. Next, are you satisfied with the state of class design as a whole? The community seems to have a negative opinion on this topic lately. Hey, that's a great question that was not asked by me. For those of you who have watched some of my previous videos, I do plan on talking about, or I already did kind of talk about the state of class design and some of my dissatisfactions with it. But this question, I admit, was really vague, so Ian was equally vague with his kinds of answers, but he did acknowledge how things have progressed or things have changed over time, ever since however many years ago when they started pushing towards specializations as opposed to expanding talent trees. The challenge that Ian is identifying is a kind of fight between short-term excitement or otherwise, here's what's currently going on in this expansion. We have artifact weapons. We have the Heart of Azeroth. Yeah, versus the long term. Because once we get to the next expansion, people are going to be passing by the world of Legion and the world of Battle for Azeroth and progressing through that content really quick, and they're going to see that nothing really happens. There is no artifact interaction in Legion as we see it right now. There more than likely isn't going to be Azerite gear interaction when they progress through Kul Tiras or Zandalar. For the most part, Ian's answer to this question was nope, they are not satisfied with the state of class design as it is currently. I think that it could use a lot of work and, very importantly, a lot of inspiration from any source, whether it's other games, whether it's from fans, submitting ideas, anything like that. So my personal response to anybody would be to keep the conversation going. Keep it productive, keep it cordial. You don't have to be kissing Blizzard butt, but just keep talking to them. The last two questions are definitely a ramp down. So can we expect any form of legendaries throughout BFA like mop cloaks or WAD rings? At the moment, no plans for that. That's it. And finally, what's the status on uncoupling artifact pairs for transmog? I really want to mog shield and sword separately on my prop pally. Hey, you know what? Me too. Unfortunately, there are no plans for that currently in the works either. So that about wraps things up, and overall it was a Q&A. They answered some stuff, and to some, or many in fact, you might not be satisfied with some of those answers. For me, it is what it is. Like I said, I'm really excited about the Heart of Azeroth changes or the Azerite gear changes that are coming up. Despite what anyone may think, I give Ian a lot of props for month after month. He's been coming out here answering questions as best as he can, and taking all the heat from the players over on the Twitch chat, on the forums, and elsewhere. They've had plenty of mishaps, and I'm at least happy to know that they've been coming out to say, yeah, we did, but next month is another month with all sorts of other drama to unfold. And according to what they had said towards the end of this, next month they're also the Q&A is going to be more directed on the focus of lore. So who knows who we might see? It's probably not going to be Ian at the chair. It might be someone like Alex Afrasiabi or Christy Golden or folks like those. So I'm excited to see that, and of course you can tune in right here for all my coverage on that, so I can cover the responses and give my own opinions on whatever the heck it is that they said. So yeah, that's it from me. Please support the channel the best way you feel like it by liking this video if you enjoyed yourself, or by subscribing so I can keep giving you more of this and all things Warcraft. I'll see you next time. Until then, stay safe, stay happy, and stay breezy.